welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we are going to dive into the truly startling evolution of the world's most watched game. Now, we usually think of football, or soccer depending on where you're from, as this highly polished, multi-billion-dollar corporate spectacle. But its origins? Oh, they are anything but polished. We're going to explore exactly how this sport evolved from hyper-violent, totally lawless brawls into the massive global phenomenon that unites, and yeah, sometimes divides, the world today.
Take a second and look at this staggering number, 3,000 to 6,000. You might be wondering, is that like the attendance for some really early match? Nope, not even close. That actually represents the number of human lives lost during a 4-day military conflict between El Salvador and Honduras back in 1969.
It sounds completely crazy, right? But it brilliantly shows just how raw the power of this sport really is. Sure, demographic tensions over land were already brewing between these two nations, but it was a 1970 World Cup qualifying match that acted as the absolute match in the powder keg. El Salvador won the qualifier, immediately severed diplomatic ties, and literally the very next day, military planes were in the air. It just proves that the DNA of this sport is steeped in a fierce and sometimes incredibly deadly passion. So, to map out this journey, here's what we'll be looking at today. First, the dark side of fandom. 2, ancient origins and medieval chaos. 3, standardization and global spread. 4, the mega World Cup spectacle. And finally, 5, the controversies brewing around the 2026 games.
Let's jump right into part 1, the dark side of fandom, a legacy of violence.
Look, we all know the passion for this game is unmatched, but it has frequently demanded a devastating human toll. I mean, back in 1964, during a match between Peru and Argentina, a massive stadium riot led to the deaths of 328 people, which is still one of the darkest days in sports history. Fast forward to the 1994 World Cup, where Colombian defender Andres Escobar accidentally scored an own goal. That mistake led to his tragic assassination back home. Even as recently as 2012, a local match riot in Egypt's Port Said Stadium left 74 dead. The fervor of the crowd is intoxicating for sure, but it can turn lethal in an absolute flash.
Moving on to part 2, ancient origins and medieval chaos. To really wrap our heads around why the game can get so inherently violent, we've got to look back at its roots. As you can see, humans have basically always loved kicking a ball. The ancient Mesoamericans played early ball games, the Greeks had their own versions, but the sport really took its earliest recognizable shape in China around 206 BC with a game called Cuju. That said, the modern sport's direct, highly aggressive ancestor emerged much later in medieval Europe.
And here is the crucial point. It looked absolutely nothing like the game today. Look at this comparison. Modern football, you've got 11 players, manicured grass, and super strict rules. Medieval football? Actually, scratch that. It wasn't even a sport. It was basically a massive hyper-violent brawl disguised as a game. You could have up to 200 players going at it on a field that spanned 2 miles across active farmlands. There were practically no rules. The goal could just be the gates of a neighboring village's church. And physically beating the opposing players, that wasn't a foul. That was literally the primary strategy.
It got so incredibly chaotic that in 1314, King Edward II of England actually banned the sport. Why? Well, he was furious because young men were wasting their time brawling in these massive matches instead of practicing archery for, actual military combat. But get this, local churches would sometimes actively encourage these violent games on special annual holidays. They essentially used them as a societal pressure valve so villagers could violently vent their anger and frustrations. Crazy, right?
All right, part 3, standardization and global spread. So, how in the world do we get from 200 guys brawling in a village to the highly organized sport we know today? The answer is the Industrial Revolution. As factories sprang up everywhere, society needed a highly disciplined workforce, people who understood strict timing, rules, and teamwork. Administrators realized that standardized sports were the perfect tool to instill that discipline. So in 1863, the Football Association was formed in England to unify all those chaotic village rules into one standard format. And that eventually paved the way for FIFA to be created in 1904.
From there, the idea just spread like wildfire. Driven by European colonial expansion and Christian missionaries, the game went completely global. Take India, for example. The sport found massive, incredibly passionate strongholds there. In West Bengal, the fierce rivalry between Mohun Bagan and East Bengal is just as intense as any massive club loyalty you'd see in Europe. The game also embedded itself deeply into the local cultures of Kerala and Tamil Nadu.
In fact, if you walk through North Chennai today, specifically the Vyasarpati area, you'll witness a local culture so intensely devoted to the sport that they literally dub it the mini Brazil of Tamil Nadu. Thanks to the influence of community legends pouring their hearts into the area, you've got kids playing in the streets with a flair and passion that totally rivals anywhere in South America.
Which brings us to Part 4, the Mega World Cup spectacle.
The ultimate celebration of this global obsession is, without a doubt, the World Cup. But for a lot of nations, especially in South America and Africa, this tournament is way more than just a sporting event. After the heavy toll of colonialism and some brutal economic hardships, football acted as a genuine psychological savior. For nations like Brazil and Argentina, the game became this profound source of national resurgence and immense pride. It basically elevated the sport to the level of a religion, turning legendary players like Diego Maradona into absolute gods in the eyes of the fans.
And when we look at the modern tournament today, the sheer scale of it is just mind-blowing. Check this out. The upcoming 2026 World Cup is projected to create a staggering 824,000 direct and indirect jobs. That is a massive economic engine that transforms the infrastructure of entire nations.
Plus, the financial stakes have literally never been higher. The winner of the 2026 World Cup is set to walk away with a monumental 476 crore rupees. Even the runners-up and third-place teams are pulling in hundreds of crores. To put that into perspective, we are a very, very long way from the sport's humble, muddy beginnings.
Finally, let's look at Part 5, controversies of the 2026 Games. Because as this spectacle scales up to unprecedented heights, so do the massive logistical headaches. For the first time ever, the 2026 tournament is going to be hosted across 3 giant nations: the US with 11 venues, Mexico with 3, and Canada with 2. Not only is the map getting bigger, but the tournament itself is expanding from 32 teams to a massive 48.
But this massive footprint creates absolute logistical nightmares. Imagine the physical toll on the players facing exhausting cross-country flights traversing the entire North American continent. Furthermore, for fans in regions like Asia, including the massive fan bases in India, the time zone differences mean they're going to be forced to watch crucial matches deep into the middle of the night. Add to that the unpredictability of extreme weather driven by climate change across all these diverse geographies, and man, you have a recipe for chaos.
Then there are the significant geopolitical hurdles to navigate. Right now, strict U.S. visa policies are creating major bottlenecks. These administrative hurdles are threatening to literally lock out key players, officials, and even referees, particularly those hailing from nations in the Middle East, like Iran and various countries across Africa. It poses a very real question about the accessibility of a truly global tournament if people can't even get in.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. As we look ahead, our world is currently facing major global crises, from inflation and political unrest to the logistical nightmares of this upcoming mega-tournament. We really have to ask ourselves, will the 2026 World Cup be able to transcend its own chaotic, violent roots and these modern controversies to successfully bring humanity together once again? It's a massive, fascinating question. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.